Okay, so I want to comment a little bit about the situation in Hong Kong. I haven't done this for a while, so it's about time I made an update on this and my thoughts on the situation. The protests are ongoing, and it doesn't look like there's been any progress insofar as talks are concerned. There was a well-documented meeting between some of the students and some local officials, and it didn't really seem to go anywhere. That meeting was broadcast to the protesters, and every time the students appeared there was a big cheer, and every time the officials appeared there was a big boo. Insofar as my own position is concerned, I can only reflect on what I see as an outsider. I'm not on the ground, so I want to make that a disclaimer. I'm not on the ground, so obviously it's impossible for me to reflect on every single thing that is going on there, and that's why I want to be objective in this video, because I don't know the whole situation and I'm not pretending that I do. I think that there is a point here where there's going to have to be some responsibility from both sides, and I include the protesters in that. From day one, I've been very, very sympathetic to the anger that they have felt and the concerns that they have about the Chinese Communist Party trying to get more and more and more of a grip on Hong Kong. It is obvious that is what they're trying to do, and let's not forget the basis of these protests in the first place, which is they feel very strongly that the CCP have betrayed their promise to allow universal suffrage in 2017, also full democratic elections that year. It's still 3 years away, so anything can happen, but the way things are going, it doesn't look like they're going to change at all. I'd be very surprised if they did. And single party regimes are not known for backing down to anyone, so it's highly unlikely that they're going to make reforms whereby they will change the situation. And the situation, as far as I know it, is they're going to handpick the candidates. So it's going to be an absolute sham of an election. That's not democracy at all, because all the candidates are going to be approved by Beijing. So the anger that the protesters feel is entirely understandable. And instead of telling international journalists to keep their nose out of it, the Chinese Communist Party should be explaining why they are going to betray this pledge they made in the Anglo-British Declaration during the handover in 1997, because they are betraying that promise of allowing full democratic elections to take place if the candidates are handpicked. Mr. Leung, the chief executive, has publicly said that Beijing isn't going to back down, so he's conceding that, and he himself is refusing to step down, which is one of the key demands of the protesters. So from their side, I believe they have brought on the situation. You know, one of the main mantras of China, and bear with me because I'm going to look at both sides here. One of the main mantras of China is that stability is the number one thing, and they're also applying that to Hong Kong. So clearly the party leadership is very worried about what's happening there, but I think they know full well that they cannot use the sort of force that they would use in a mainland city. And Hong Kongers also know this. They know that they have, at least for now, freedoms that mainlanders don't have. And I have heard dissidents in the mainland sort of praise these protests and say we want the same sort of freedom here to express dissent. Of course, there's been mainlanders as well who said, oh, this is what democracy brings, this sort of instability. I think it's very unfortunate that democracy is being tarnished with an association with instability. The protests and the unrest in Hong Kong is not the fault of democracy. It's the fault of the Communist Party basically being so arrogant and saying that they will handpick candidates. So blaming democracy, I think, is a cop-out. Democracy is not the enemy of stability. You can have stability and democracy at the same time. And when you look around the world, this is something that I've noticed. Countries that tend to be more authoritarian tend to use democracy as an excuse for the authoritarian situation continuing. And they'll say things like, oh, look at Iraq, look at Libya, look at countries where the West has tried to promote democracy, look at the mess they're in. But they're ignoring the fact that stable, developed democracies are actually very, on the whole, progressive societies. Look at countries like Canada, look at Germany, look at Japan. On the whole, they are progressive societies. Not perfect societies, but they're politically stable. They are generally have freedom of expression. They're not unstable societies. So automatically associating democracy with instability is a big mistake. And I think it's something that these regimes use to keep themselves in power. Having said that, there is something I want to also express in this video, which is a concern that I've had for a while, and that is the protesters themselves have become divided, because I have seen a lot of comments coming into papers like The Economist, like Time Magazine and so on, from Hong Kong, is saying that they agree with the principles of the protests, but the protests themselves are actually alienating Hong Kong society. And I can see that. I do believe now the hardcore protesters are being quite selfish, frankly. They have to realise they cannot continue this sit-in protest forever. They cannot hold Hong Kong to a standstill. For one thing, it is going to have a serious impact on Hong Kong's economy. And that's nothing to do with being pro or anti-communist, it's just a fact. It will have an impact on Hong Kong's economy. Also, it is unfair on other Hong Kongers who just want to get on with their lives, who want to bring their children to school, who want to go to their business and so on. It is unfair, and it is creating a situation that is just perpetual unrest. I mean, this is about democracy, it shouldn't be about anarchy. What I mean by that is you don't want a situation where Hong Kong is just collapses because these protests are going on and on and on. The sit-in format cannot continue forever, and I've even heard councillors who wholeheartedly agree with the protests, but who take issue with the fact that protesters are alienating them. They're legislators in the end of the day, and they're in the position of trying to make the negotiations that are necessary. So the protesters are making their job difficult by alienating the public. I think the majority of people of Hong Kong do not want to live under a communist system. I think that's obvious. But I also believe the majority of people of Hong Kong want now a return to normal. And the hardcore protesters need to realise this. It's the same in any democratic society, actually. If you have hardcore protesters who disrupt day-to-day living, then what you're going to do is turn the public against you. I've seen this in London, I've seen it in Ottawa, I've seen it in democratic countries, where you have hardline protesters, and sometimes they get infiltrated by extremists. I'm not saying that's necessarily the case in Hong Kong, but my message to the hardline protesters is, whilst the values that you're fighting for are very good, this approach is no longer working. Now you need to hold back, dismantle the tents, and let Hong Kong get back to normal, because all you're going to do is turn the majority of Hong Kongers against you, and then you'll never have the sort of goals that you're looking for in 2017. The point has been made now. The international community has seen this. Beijing has seen this. Okay, they might not change overnight, but the message has been sent out there, and it might inspire other Hong Kongers to speak out against the system. But now it has to be through legislation, not disrupting Hong Kong. So I am a bit concerned about the direction this is taking, and I think the hardcore protesters are only going to alienate the majority of Hong Kongers. The other thing is, regarding the police, I've seen mixed messages on this. I've seen protesters say that the police have attacked them without any provocation. I've seen others say that the Hong Kong police continue to be some of the most professional in the world. I have to say, in all the videos I have seen, I have not seen the police use any serious brutality. I have not seen police officers beating people to a pulp. I have seen some rough actions. I have seen, for example, the use of tear gas was unjustified, but you have to remember the police are human beings as well, and if you put them in a siege situation, in other words, if you have a large number of protesters and a small number of police who feel encircled, those police are only human. They're going to react as human beings. Even if you're not using violence against them, you know, these are people who are working around the clock to try and please everyone. They're trying to allow protesters to have their say, but also they have to cater for the Hong Kongers who demand that action be taken against people who are, for example, obstructing highways. So if you're obstructing the highway and a police officer arrests you, you can't really complain because you're disrupting Hong Kong. That isn't. It may be peaceful, but it isn't really productive, and it isn't really making any point other than annoying people. So the message I want to send out is that I completely agree with the principles of the protests, which is for democracy, but I think that the tactics are going to alienate people. I am concerned about that. So I would plead with the protesters, please be sensible. Please now start to realise all this is doing is dividing Hong Kong more and more, and it's only going to turn the majority of people against you, people who might otherwise agree with the position you have. Now I respect the courage that you had initially to do these protests. I do respect that, and they were important initially. I support the right to protest, but there has to be a point when you realise this cannot go on forever. I mean, are you just going to stay in these camps until 2017? Really? I mean, I understand the argument here that democracy and the push for that is more important than anything, but my concern is Hong Kongers who might be sympathetic to you are being turned off because they see this as disrupting Hong Kong's stability and also Hong Kong's international reputation. So, just in conclusion, I will always stand by the principles of democracy. I understand the anger at the communist regime in Beijing, but if you alienate the people of Hong Kong, if you turn them against you, then nothing is going to happen. Okay, I'm not saying if you dismantle all the tents and stop the protests, then CY Leung is going to step down and the CCP is going to back off. I'm not saying that. But what you will do, you've made the point now, and at least it will get Hong Kongers something to think about, which means that when 2017 comes, I think that the protests can start again. But you cannot conceivably have a situation where you just shut down Hong Kong. It's not practical at all.